Walk into any Walmart today and you're stepping into the single most powerful retail empire ever constructed on this planet. With over $600 billion in annual revenue, more than 2 million employees worldwide, and stores stretching across 24 countries, Walmart doesn't just dominate retail, it defines it. Over 140 million Americans walk through its doors every single week. Families save an average of $2,500 annually shopping there, and the Walton family has accumulated a fortune exceeding $200 billion, making them one of the wealthiest dynasties in human history. This isn't just a business success story. This is a complete transformation of how the world shops, how communities access goods, and how fortunes are built from the ground up. But here's what makes this story absolutely mesmerizing. Before the billions, before the empire, before the private jets and the boardrooms and the global domination, there was a skinny kid walking dirt roads in Depression-era Oklahoma. His shoes were worn through, his clothes were hand-me-downs, and his stomach growled with the kind of hunger that millions of Americans knew all too well during those brutal 1930s. This boy wasn't destined for greatness according to any conventional measure. He was just trying to survive, carrying newspapers door to door in the freezing cold and delivering glass bottles of milk before sunrise just to help his family scrape together enough money to eat. The contrast is almost impossible to comprehend. From a child who counted pennies like they were gold coins to the architect of a retail revolution that would process billions of transactions and touch billions of lives. So how does that transformation actually happen? How does a newspaper boy with nothing but calloused hands and an empty wallet become the man who builds the largest company in the world? You might think it's luck or timing or being in the right place at the right moment, but the truth is far more fascinating and far more instructive. This is the story of Samuel Moore Walton, a man whose childhood poverty didn't break him but instead forged an obsession with value, with efficiency, with giving working families access to goods they could actually afford. Every mile he walked delivering papers, every penny he earned and counted, every sacrifice his family made during those desperate Depression years became the foundation for a business philosophy that would eventually disrupt and demoliate every major retailer in America. The story you're about to hear isn't just about building a business. It's about revolutionizing an entire industry that everyone thought was already perfected. When Sam Walton opened that first Walmart store in Rogers, Arkansas on July 2, 1962, the so-called experts laughed at him. They dismissed his idea that you could build a massive retail empire by operating in small rural towns that big city retailers completely ignored. They mocked his insistence on keeping prices so low that profit margins seemed almost non-existent. They couldn't understand why this country boy driving a beat-up pickup truck and shopping at discount stores himself thought he could compete against giants like Sears, Kmart, and Woolworth, companies with decades of dominance and billions in resources. But here's what those experts completely missed. Sam Walton understood something they never could because he had lived something they never had. He understood what it meant to be poor. He understood what it felt like to watch your parents worry about whether they could afford groceries, to see your mother stretching every dollar until it screamed, to know that the difference between eating and going hungry could come down to saving just a few cents on each purchase. That understanding, that visceral knowledge of what working families needed and deserved, became the rocket fuel that powered Walmart's unstoppable rise. While his competitors focused on maximizing profit margins and building fancy stores in wealthy suburbs, Sam focused on one thing with laser-like intensity: giving ordinary people access to goods at prices they could actually afford. It wasn't charity. It was brilliant strategy married to genuine empathy born from his own childhood struggles. By 1991, less than 30 years after opening that first store, Walmart had achieved the impossible. It surpassed Sears, Roebuck and Company, the retail titan that had dominated American shopping for nearly a century, to become the largest retailer in the United States. Think about that timeline for a moment. 3 decades to go from a single discount store in rural Arkansas to dethroning a retail empire that seemed utterly untouchable. By the time Sam Walton died in 1992 at age 74, he had built over 1,700 Walmart stores, over 200 Sam's Club warehouse outlets, and employed more than 380,000 people. His company was generating nearly $50 billion in annual sales, and he himself had become the richest man in America, worth over $25 billion. But here's what's truly remarkable. What separates this story from every other rags to riches tale you've ever heard. Sam Walton never forgot that hungry kid delivering newspapers in the Depression. Even as a billionaire, he drove an old pickup truck, flew coach on commercial airlines, and lived in the same modest house in Bentonville, Arkansas, for decades. He didn't build Walmart to become rich. Becoming rich was almost a side effect of his obsession with creating value for customers. Every decision, every strategy, every innovation was driven by one simple question that came directly from his childhood. How can we help working families afford the things they need? That question, born from genuine hardship and maintained through decades of success, became the foundation of the most successful retail operation in human history. Today, Walmart operates over 11,000 stores worldwide. It employs 2.3 million people, making it one of the largest private employers on Earth. Its annual revenue exceeds $650 billion, more than the GDP of most countries. The company processes billions of transactions every year, and its supply chain innovations have revolutionized global logistics and distribution. Every aspect of modern retail, from inventory management to vendor relationships to store layout, has been influenced or completely transformed by strategies Sam Walton pioneered. This isn't just a business. It's an infrastructure that shapes how billions of people access goods and services. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the empire, before the billions, before the revolution, there was just a boy trying to help his family survive the worst economic catastrophe America had ever seen. To understand how Walmart conquered the world, you first have to understand the Depression-era poverty that forged its founder. You have to see the young Sam Walton walking those newspaper routes, delivering milk before dawn, learning lessons about value and hard work that would echo through every decision he made for the rest of his life. You have to understand that the world's largest retailer wasn't built in boardrooms or business schools. It was built in the desperate struggle of a family trying to survive, in the mind of a boy who learned to count every penny because every penny genuinely mattered. So let's go back to the beginning, back to Kingfisher, Oklahoma in 1918, when Samuel Moore Walton was born into a world that was about to collapse. Let's follow that skinny kid through the Depression years, watch him develop the work ethic and the understanding of value that would define everything that came after. Because here's the truth that every expert missed, the secret that allowed Sam to build what no one else could. The greatest retail empire in history wasn't born from privilege or education or connections. It was born from hunger, from struggle, from a childhood spent watching pennies and learning that value isn't about what something costs you. It's about what it's worth to the people who need it most. That lesson, learned in poverty and applied with genius, changed retail forever. March 29, 1918. That's when Samuel Moore Walton entered the world in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, a small farming town that seemed frozen in time even before the economic catastrophe that was about to engulf America. His parents, Thomas Gibson Walton and Nancy Lee Lawrence Walton, were ordinary people trying to carve out an ordinary life through farming, the backbone of rural Oklahoma's economy. They had no way of knowing that their firstborn son would one day build an empire worth hundreds of billions, that his name would become synonymous with retail itself, or that the hardships they were about to endure would forge the philosophy that would revolutionize how the world shops. For now, they were just farmers hoping the land would provide enough to survive. But the land didn't provide enough. By 1923, when Sam was just 5 years old, Thomas Walton faced the brutal reality that millions of American farmers confronted. You can work yourself to exhaustion, pour your soul into the soil, and still not make enough money to feed your family. Farming had failed them, so Thomas made a desperate pivot into farm mortgaging, working for his brother's Walton Mortgage Company as an agent for Metropolitan Life Insurance. It was honest work, necessary work, but it came with a devastating responsibility that would haunt the Walton family and teach young Sam lessons he would never forget. Thomas had to foreclose on farms during the Great Depression, knocking on doors and delivering the news that would destroy families, watching men break down as they lost everything they had worked for, witnessing the human cost of economic catastrophe up close and personal. Imagine what that does to a child. Sam didn't just read about the Depression in history books or hear about it secondhand. He watched it destroy his neighbors, his community, people his father knew by name. Thomas Walton tried desperately to help foreclosed farmers retain their dignity and self-respect, understanding that taking someone's farm wasn't just a business transaction but the end of their dreams, their identity, their hope. Young Sam absorbed all of it. The shame, the desperation, the grinding poverty, the gut-wrenching reality that hard work alone wasn't always enough. This wasn't abstract economic theory. This was daily life, and it burned itself into Sam's consciousness in a way that would define every business decision he made for the next 70 years. The family couldn't stay put. Financial instability forced them to move from one small town to another throughout the 1920s and early 30s, bouncing around mostly in Missouri, always chasing the next opportunity, never quite finding stability. In 1921, Sam's younger brother James Lawrence Walton, who everyone called Bud, was born in Kingfisher, giving Sam a lifelong companion who would eventually become his business partner. The two boys grew up understanding one fundamental truth that separated Depression-era children from almost every generation that came before or after. If you wanted to eat, you worked. There were no allowances, no handouts, no safety nets. You contributed to the family's survival or you watched your family suffer, and that reality created a work ethic that was almost superhuman by modern standards. So Sam worked. While other kids played, he milked the family cow before sunrise, his hands raw from the cold and the repetitive motion. He didn't just milk enough for his family, he milked extra, bottled the surplus in glass containers, loaded them into whatever vehicle they had, and drove or walked door to door selling milk to neighbors who were almost as poor as his own family. Every penny counted because every penny meant food on the table, and Sam learned to count those pennies with an intensity that never left him. After his milk route, he delivered copies of the Columbia Daily Tribune newspaper, walking miles in all weather conditions, developing calluses on his feet and an understanding of customer service that no business school could ever teach. If a customer didn't get their paper on time, they complained. If you didn't satisfy customers, you didn't earn money. If you didn't earn money, your family went hungry. The equation was brutally simple. But it didn't stop with milk and newspapers. Sam sold magazine subscriptions door to door, perfecting the art of the pitch, learning to read people, understanding what motivated them to buy, developing the persistence required to hear no 100 times and still knock on the 101st door. He took on any odd job he could find, anything that would bring in a few cents, a few dollars, anything to ease the burden on his parents and keep the family afloat. This wasn't character-building exercise or some quaint childhood memory. This was survival, pure and unvarnished, and it taught Sam Walton something that his future competitors, raised in comfort and educated in elite business schools, could never truly understand: the value of a dollar from the customer's perspective. Yet somehow, despite the grinding poverty and constant work, Sam thrived. In Shelbyna, Missouri, while in 8th grade, he became the youngest Eagle Scout in the state's history, an achievement that required discipline, leadership, and dedication far beyond what most adults could muster. Think about what that means. A kid working multiple jobs to help his family survive still found time to master complex skills, lead other scouts, and earn the highest rank in scouting. That's not normal. That's exceptional, and it demonstrated that Sam wasn't just surviving the Depression. He was using it as fuel, channeling the desperation into achievement rather than letting it break him like it broke so many others. Eventually, the family settled in Columbia, Missouri, where Sam attended David H. Hickman High School and transformed from a hardworking kid into a genuine star. He became the quarterback of the football team, leading them to an undefeated season and a state championship, proof that he could perform under pressure and lead teams to victory. He played on the state champion basketball team, excelling in yet another arena requiring coordination, strategy, and teamwork. He made the honor roll consistently, demonstrating that despite working multiple jobs, he could still outperform students who had nothing to do but study. And in his senior year, his classmates elected him student body president and voted him most versatile boy. Recognition that Sam wasn't just good at one thing but exceptional at everything he attempted. But here's what you need to understand about this period, what separates Sam's story from typical rags to riches narratives. He wasn't working and achieving to escape poverty in some abstract future sense. He was working to help his family survive today, this week, this month. Every newspaper delivered, every bottle of milk sold, every magazine subscription secured wasn't building toward some distant dream of wealth. It was ensuring his family could afford groceries. That immediate, visceral connection between work and survival created something profound in Sam's psychology. An absolute rejection of waste, an obsession with efficiency, and a bone-deep understanding that price matters desperately to working families because he had been part of a working family where price determined whether you ate or went hungry. His mother Nancy instilled relentless ambition in him, pushing him to achieve, to never settle, to always strive for more. But the Depression itself taught him something equally important. That ambition meant nothing if it didn't serve people. That business success wasn't about making yourself rich, but about creating value for others. He had watched his father foreclose on farms and seen the human cost of failure. He had knocked on doors selling newspapers and learned that customers weren't abstract economic units but real people with real struggles and limited money. He had counted every penny of his earnings and understood that when you're poor, saving 5 cents on a purchase isn't trivial. It's the difference between affording what you need and going without. These weren't lessons you could learn in a classroom or a boardroom. These were lessons burned into your soul by experience, by necessity, by watching your parents worry about money every single day. When Sam Walton eventually opened his first stores and obsessed over keeping prices low, it wasn't marketing strategy or competitive positioning. It was personal. When he demanded that every cost be cut, every efficiency be found, every penny of savings be passed to customers, he wasn't being cheap. He was honoring the struggles of his childhood and the millions of families still living those struggles. The Depression years didn't just shape Sam Walton. They created him, forging a business philosophy from desperation and determination that would eventually transform global retail. By the time Sam graduated from Hickman High School, he had achieved more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. He had helped keep his family afloat through America's worst economic crisis, become the youngest Eagle Scout in state history, led championship sports teams, earned academic honors, and won the respect and admiration of his peers. But the most important thing he had gained wasn't visible on any resume or trophy shelf. He had gained an understanding of value of work, of what working families needed and deserved that would become the foundation for the largest retail empire in human history. The newspaper boy from the Depression was about to become a college student, then a soldier, then a retailer, and eventually a revolutionary. But every step of that journey would be guided by lessons learned while walking those newspaper routes in the freezing cold, counting those pennies like they were precious gems, understanding that value isn't what something costs the seller but what it's worth to the buyer who desperately needs it. August 31st, 1945. World War II had just ended. Millions of servicemen were flooding back into civilian life searching for opportunities, and 27-year-old Sam Walton stood at a crossroads that would determine not just his future, but the future of global retail. He had served his country honorably in the Army Intelligence Corps, managing security at aircraft plants and prisoner of war camps, earning the rank of captain, and saving every penny he could from his military pay. Now he was married to Helen Robson, the daughter of a successful banker and rancher from Claremore, Oklahoma, and they had a decision to make. What kind of life would they build together? Sam knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted to run a store, to apply everything he had learned delivering newspapers and selling milk, to test whether the lessons of the Depression could translate into business success. But wanting to run a store and actually acquiring one are two completely different challenges, especially when you're a young veteran with limited capital facing an uncertain post-war economy. Sam had managed to save $5,000 from his military service, an impressive sum that demonstrated the same penny-counting discipline he had learned as a child, but it wasn't nearly enough to purchase a retail operation. This is where family became crucial, where Sam's marriage to Helen opened a door that his own depression-scarred family never could have opened. Helen's father, Leland Robson, was a prosperous businessman who had survived the Depression not just intact but thriving, owning a ranch and serving as a banker, accumulating the kind of capital that could change lives. Sam approached his father-in-law with a proposal. Lend me $20,000 so I can buy a variety store and prove I can make it succeed. Think about the courage that required. Sam was asking for what would be equivalent to over $350,000 in today's money from his wife's father, putting his reputation and his marriage on the line, gambling everything on his belief that he understood retail better than the established experts. Leland Robson could have easily said no. His daughter had married a poor farm boy turned military officer with no retail experience beyond delivering newspapers as a child, and the business failure rate was astronomical. But Robson saw something in Sam, perhaps recognizing the work ethic and determination that had defined his son-in-law's entire life, and he agreed to the loan. With that $20,000 combined with his own $5,000 in savings, Sam suddenly had $25,000 in capital and the chance to prove whether the newspaper boy from the Depression could actually build something extraordinary. The opportunity came through the Butler Brothers chain, a franchise operation that supplied and supported Ben Franklin variety stores across America. They had a location available in Newport, Arkansas, a small cotton and railroad town with a population of about 7,000 people nestled in the northeastern part of the state. The existing Ben Franklin store was struggling, doing only about $32,000 in annual sales, which meant it was barely surviving, and the owner in St. Louis was eager to unload it for $25,000. To the Butler Brothers franchise people, Sam Walton was perfect, a naive young veteran with just enough money to take a money-losing store off their hands. A sucker who didn't realize he was buying into a failing operation in a small market with limited growth potential. They practically celebrated finding someone willing to pay $25,000 for what many considered a retail dead end. But here's what those Butler Brothers executives completely misunderstood about Sam Walton. He wasn't naive. He was hungry in a way they could never comprehend. He had delivered newspapers in the freezing cold and sold milk door to door not for pocket money but for survival, developing an understanding of customer needs and cost management that no franchise manual could teach. He had watched his father foreclose on farms during the Depression and learned that businesses fail when they don't provide genuine value to customers who are counting every penny. He had saved $5,000 from military pay by living frugally while others spent freely, demonstrating a discipline that would define every decision he made. Newport, Arkansas, wasn't a dead end. It was a laboratory, a testing ground where Sam could implement revolutionary ideas without corporate oversight or franchise restrictions limiting his creativity. Sam attacked that Newport store with an intensity that shocked the town. He didn't just manage it. He revolutionized it, applying concepts that were years ahead of their time. He pioneered self-service merchandising, allowing customers to browse freely rather than having to ask clerks to retrieve items from behind counters, creating a shopping experience that was faster, more efficient, and less intimidating for Depression-era customers who often felt judged by store clerks. He obsessively controlled costs, negotiating directly with wholesalers, buying in bulk when he could get discounts, finding suppliers who could beat Butler Brothers' prices even though his franchise agreement supposedly required him to buy from the chain. He kept his store open longer hours than competitors, understanding that working families couldn't always shop during traditional business hours, and that convenience created loyalty just as much as low prices did. He studied every competitor within driving distance, visiting their stores, analyzing their strategies, stealing any good idea he found and improving on it. And it worked. Within just 2.5 years, Sam had paid back the entire $20,000 loan to his father-in-law, an almost unbelievable achievement that demonstrated the store wasn't just surviving but thriving. By the third year of ownership, that struggling store that had been doing $32,000 annually was generating $175,000 in sales, more than a 5-fold increase in just 3 years. Some accounts put the final number even higher, at $225,000 or even $250,000, with profits between $30,000 and $40,000 annually, which was substantial wealth in 1948 dollars. Sam had set himself a 5-year goal to make his store the most profitable Ben Franklin in the region, and he had crushed that goal in just 3 years, becoming not just successful but spectacularly successful, the talk of the entire franchise system. The Newport Ben Franklin became a case study in innovative retail management. Sam implemented profit sharing with his employees decades before it became common practice. Understanding that workers who benefited from the store's success would work harder and smarter, he kept meticulous records of every transaction, analyzing what sold and what didn't, which suppliers offered the best value, which promotions generated the most traffic, building a database of knowledge that informed every decision. He created eye-catching displays that drew customers into the store and encouraged impulse purchases, understanding retail psychology long before it became an academic discipline. He offered prices that undercut competitors even when it meant accepting lower profit margins, betting that volume would compensate for reduced margins, a strategy that would eventually define Walmart's entire business model. Word of Sam's success spread throughout the Butler Brothers franchise system and beyond. This young veteran had taken a failing store in a small town and transformed it into one of the most profitable variety stores in the region, and everyone wanted to understand how he had done it. Even a penny auditor who had once threatened to fire Sam during his brief management training stint came through Newport, heard about the successful Ben Franklin, and refused to believe it could be the same Sam Walton he had dismissed as incompetent years earlier. But it was the same Sam Walton, only now he was proving that his unconventional ideas, his obsession with low prices and high volume, his willingness to break rules and challenge conventional retail wisdom, weren't the ramblings of an inexperienced kid but the foundation of a revolutionary approach to retail. By 1949, Sam Walton's Newport Ben Franklin was the crown jewel of his young retail empire, generating extraordinary sales and profits, establishing his reputation as an innovative merchant, and seemingly setting him up for unlimited expansion and success. He had proven that the lessons learned delivering newspapers and watching pennies during the Depression could translate into retail dominance. He had shown that a small-town store could thrive if it offered genuine value to working families. He had demonstrated that conventional retail wisdom wasn't wisdom at all but outdated thinking waiting to be disrupted. The future looked limitless, unstoppable, secured by his own talent and determination. But Sam Walton was about to learn the most important business lesson of his entire life, a lesson that would be more valuable than all the success he had achieved. He was about to discover that talent and hard work alone aren't enough, that you can build something extraordinary and still lose everything because of a single oversight, a single mistake in the foundation of your business structure. The Newport store that seemed like the beginning of an empire was actually about to become the site of a catastrophic failure that would nearly break Sam Walton, but would ultimately teach him the lessons that made Walmart's future dominance possible. Success, it turns out, can be far more dangerous than failure because success makes you believe you're invincible right before reality teaches you otherwise. 1949 should have been Sam Walton's victory lap. His Newport Ben Franklin store was generating over $200,000 in annual sales, crushing every competitor within a 100-mile radius and becoming the talk of the entire Butler Brothers franchise system. He had paid back his father-in-law's $20,000 loan in less than 3 years, proving that his unconventional retail strategies weren't just lucky guesses but genuine innovations that created extraordinary value. Industry observers were visiting Newport to study his methods, competitors were trying to copy his approach, and Sam was already planning expansion, envisioning a chain of stores that would bring his low-price, high-volume philosophy to communities across Arkansas and beyond. Everything he had worked for since delivering newspapers in the Depression, every lesson he had learned about value and customer service, every sacrifice he had made was finally paying off in spectacular fashion. But there was a problem, a ticking time bomb buried in the foundation of Sam's success that he had overlooked in his excitement to get started 5 years earlier. When he purchased the Newport store in 1945, Sam had signed a 5-year lease for the building with the property owner, a man named Holmes. In his eagerness to launch his retail career and his confidence that success would naturally lead to lease renewal, Sam had made a catastrophic mistake. He had failed to negotiate a clause guaranteeing his right to renew the lease when it expired. It seemed like a minor detail at the time, just legal paperwork that didn't matter as much as the actual work of building the business, transforming customer experiences and generating sales. But now, as 1949 progressed and the lease expiration approached, that overlooked detail was about to destroy everything Sam had built. Holmes had been watching Sam's success with growing interest. He had seen the struggling store he owned transform into a retail powerhouse generating extraordinary sales and profits. He had witnessed customers flooding into the location, money flowing through the registers, and Sam Walton becoming prosperous from a business operating in Holmes' building. And Holmes had a son who needed an opportunity, a son who could run that profitable store if only Sam Walton wasn't in the way. The math was brutally simple from Holmes' perspective. Why let someone else get rich using my property when my own family could capture all that profit? The fact that Sam had built the business from nothing, that the store had been failing before Sam's innovations transformed it, that every penny of profit came from Sam's genius and grinding work ethic meant absolutely nothing to Holmes. He owned the building, and ownership gave him power. So when Sam approached Holmes about renewing the lease, confident that his success would make renewal automatic, Holmes delivered news that must have felt like a physical blow. No, the landlord refused to renew the lease, stating clearly that he wanted the location for his son to operate. Sam couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had transformed a failing store into the most successful variety store in the region, had paid substantial rent faithfully for 5 years, had proven himself as a merchant and a businessman, and now he was being told that none of it mattered. His success hadn't secured his future. It had actually sealed his doom because the landlord was seizing the profitable business Sam had built through innovation and relentless effort. The boy who had survived the depression by counting pennies and working multiple jobs was about to learn that in business, working hard and succeeding aren't always enough if you don't control the essential assets. Sam tried everything. He offered Holmes more money, proposing to pay premium rent that would exceed what anyone else would offer. He explained his expansion plans, how the Newport store could be the flagship of a growing chain that would bring prestige and additional business to the entire downtown area. He appealed to fairness, pointing out that he had built the store's success from scratch and deserved the opportunity to continue operating it. He even tried to negotiate purchasing the building outright, offering to buy the property so Holmes would profit handsomely while Sam secured his future. But Holmes was unmoved. His son wanted the store, and Sam Walton, despite all his success and all his pleading, was simply a tenant whose lease was expiring. The law was crystal clear. Without a renewal clause in the original lease, Sam had no legal right to remain in the building, and Holmes had every legal right to decline renewal for any reason or no reason at all. The devastation was total and absolute. Sam had to sell his inventory, his fixtures, his carefully curated supplier relationships, everything that made the store successful, for approximately $50,000 to the incoming tenant, Holmes' son. On the surface, that might sound like Sam doubled his initial $25,000 investment, walking away with a profit that many people would celebrate. But think about what he was really losing. A business generating over $200,000 in annual sales with $30,000 to $40,000 in annual profits, positioned for unlimited growth, representing 5 years of brutal work and brilliant innovation. Selling for $50,000 meant losing the golden goose for a fraction of what it was genuinely worth, essentially giving away a money-printing machine because of a clause he had failed to negotiate 5 years earlier. The boy who had learned to count every penny in the Depression was being forced to surrender a fortune because of a single oversight. But here's where this story transforms from tragedy into something far more important. Most people would have been broken by this experience, crushed by the injustice of building something extraordinary and having it stolen through legal technicality. Most people would have walked away from retail entirely, convinced that the game was rigged and that hard work meant nothing when property owners could seize your success. Most people would have taken that $50,000, gotten a safe job working for someone else, and spent the rest of their lives bitter about what could have been. Sam Walton wasn't most people. Instead of being destroyed by the Newport disaster, he studied it, analyzed it, turned it into a lesson that would shape every decision he made for the next 4 decades. The lesson was brutally simple. Never again would Sam Walton build a business on property he didn't control. When he eventually opened Walmart stores across America, ownership of the real estate became a core component of the business strategy, insulating the company from landlords who might refuse lease renewals or demand unreasonable rent increases. When Walmart did lease properties, the contracts included ironclad renewal clauses and terms that protected the company's interests for decades. The Newport betrayal taught Sam that in retail, location isn't just important. It's everything, and you cannot build an empire on land controlled by people whose interests don't align with yours. Every Walmart store, every Sam's Club, every property decision for the rest of Sam's life was influenced by the lesson Holmes taught him. Protect your foundation or watch everything collapse. But the lesson went deeper than just real estate strategy. The Newport experience taught Sam that success creates enemies, that building something valuable makes people want to take it from you, and that you must protect yourself legally and strategically before you start building. It taught him to read every contract, negotiate every clause, think decades ahead about what could go wrong, and never assume that fairness or merit will protect you. These weren't pleasant lessons. They were harsh, painful truths learned through devastating loss. But they were also the exact lessons Sam needed to build Walmart into an empire that couldn't be destroyed by any single landlord, any single competitor, or any single setback. In 1950, Sam and Helen Walton left Newport, taking their young family and moving 90 miles northwest to Bentonville, Arkansas, a small town of about 3,000 people nestled in the Ozark Mountains. Sam used the $50,000 from selling his Newport store to purchase a building on the town square for $50,000, this time ensuring he owned the property outright. He opened Walton's Five and Dime, starting over from scratch but armed with 5 years of experience, proven strategies, and hard-won wisdom about the importance of controlling your assets. The store that seemed like a step backward, a retreat from the spectacular success of Newport to a smaller market and a fresh start, was actually the foundation for something far greater. Because here's what Holmes never understood when he seized Sam's Newport store for his son. He didn't take Sam Walton's genius, his work ethic, his understanding of value, his ability to innovate, or his determination to succeed. He took a building and some inventory, physical assets that meant nothing without the vision and execution that created their value. Holmes' son ran the Newport store into mediocrity, never achieving anything close to what Sam had built, proving that success comes from the merchant, not the location. Meanwhile, Sam Walton took the lessons learned from betrayal and used them to build something Holmes couldn't even imagine. A retail empire that would eventually operate thousands of stores, generate hundreds of billions in revenue, and completely transform how the world shops. The Newport disaster wasn't the end of Sam Walton's story. It was the painful beginning of the real story, the moment when a talented merchant learned the hard lessons that separate moderately successful businessmen from empire builders. Losing everything he had built taught Sam to think bigger, protect smarter, and never again make himself vulnerable to someone else's whims. 12 years after leaving Newport in defeat, Sam would open the first Walmart, and the lessons learned from Holmes would be embedded in every aspect of that revolutionary store and every store that followed. Bentonville, Arkansas, in 1950 was nobody's idea of a retail paradise. This tiny Ozark mountain town of roughly 3,000 people had one main square, a handful of shops, limited economic prospects, and virtually no reason for anyone to believe it could become the headquarters of the world's largest retail empire. The town was so small that everyone knew everyone else's business, so quiet that the loudest noise was often roosters crowing at dawn, and so isolated that getting to a major city required hours of driving on winding mountain roads. When Sam and Helen Walton rolled into Bentonville with their young family and $50,000 from selling the Newport store, most observers would have seen a man retreating from failure, moving to an even smaller market after being pushed out of a more promising location. But Sam Walton saw something completely different. He saw opportunity, freedom, and most importantly, a foundation he would own and control. Helen Walton had been clear about what she wanted. Small-town living where she could raise their 4 children away from big-city chaos and corruption. She had grown up in a prosperous family and valued the safety, community, and simplicity that small towns provided, and Bentonville offered exactly that environment. Sam, still stinging from the Newport betrayal, had different priorities that happened to align perfectly with Helen's desires. He wanted a location where he could own the building, implement his revolutionary ideas without franchise restrictions fighting him at every turn, and operate without the kind of landlord interference that had destroyed his first success. Bentonville checked every box. It was small enough that property was affordable, Positioned at the corner of 4 states, providing access to diverse hunting seasons that Sam loved, and most critically, it had a building for sale on the town square that he could purchase outright for $50,000, the exact amount he had received from selling his Newport operation. On the Bentonville town square, in a modest building that Sam now owned completely, Walton's Five and Dime opened its doors. The name was deliberately simple, almost understated, reflecting the variety store tradition Sam had learned in the Ben Franklin system but now operated with total independence. This wasn't a franchise operation where corporate headquarters dictated suppliers, pricing strategies, or operational procedures. This was Sam Walton's laboratory, a place where he could test every crazy idea, implement every innovation, and push every boundary without asking permission from anyone. The Newport experience had taught him the importance of ownership. Now Bentonville would teach the world what Sam Walton could accomplish when nobody could take away what he built. The store was small, the market was tiny, but the potential for experimentation and innovation was absolutely unlimited. Sam immediately implemented concepts that were years ahead of their time in retail. He created one of the first true self-service variety stores in the entire 8-state region, positioning cash registers at the store exits rather than having customers line up at a central counter where clerks retrieved items from behind locked cases. This seemingly simple change revolutionized the shopping experience in ways that modern consumers take completely for granted. Customers could browse freely, touch merchandise, compare products, make decisions at their own pace without feeling pressured by hovering sales clerks, and discover items they hadn't planned to buy. For Depression-era shoppers who often felt judged or intimidated by store clerks monitoring their every move, self-service was liberation. It transformed shopping from an uncomfortable transaction into an empowering experience where customers controlled their own journey through the store. But self-service was just the beginning. Sam became obsessed with finding suppliers who could beat anyone else's prices, traveling across multiple states to visit wholesalers, manufacturers, and distributors, negotiating bulk discounts, and building relationships that gave him pricing advantages his competitors couldn't match. He would drive hundreds of miles to save a few cents per unit on products, understanding that those pennies multiplied across thousands of transactions would translate into significant savings for customers and competitive advantages that would crush local competitors. He studied every successful retailer he could find, visiting their stores, analyzing their layouts, stealing their best ideas and improving on them, creating a continuous feedback loop of innovation that kept Walton's Five and Dime constantly evolving. The newspaper boy who had walked door to door learning about customer service was now becoming a retail scientist, treating his store as an experimental laboratory where every decision was tested, measured, and optimized. The Bentonville store became profitable quickly, validating Sam's strategies and proving that the Newport success hadn't been a fluke or luck but the result of genuine retail genius. Within a few years, Sam opened additional variety stores in nearby towns like Fayetteville and other small Arkansas and Missouri communities, carefully building a small chain of stores that shared best practices, leveraged combined buying power, and slowly expanded his retail footprint across the region. His brother Bud joined the operation, bringing additional management capacity and shared vision, and together the Walton brothers began constructing the foundation of what would eventually become a retail empire. But they moved cautiously, deliberately, learning from every store opening, every success, and every failure, building organizational knowledge and operational systems that would support much larger ambitions when the time was right. During the 1950s, while operating his growing chain of variety stores, Sam became a student of retail innovation happening across America. He studied the emerging discount store concept that was beginning to disrupt traditional retail, visiting pioneering operations like N & Hope in Rhode Island, Kmart in California, and other early discounters who were proving that consumers would drive significant distances and shop in no-frills environments if prices were low enough. He saw retailers like Eugene Furkoff at Corvette and Soul Price at Kmart demonstrating that high-volume, low-margin retail could generate spectacular profits through operational efficiency and economies of scale. These weren't just shopping trips. They were reconnaissance missions where Sam absorbed every lesson, studied every detail, and began envisioning how discount retailing could be adapted to small-town America in ways that big-city discounters had never considered. because here's what Sam understood that virtually every other retailer in America missed. The discount retail revolution was focusing exclusively on large metropolitan areas and suburban markets, completely ignoring the millions of Americans living in small towns and rural communities. Retailers like Kmart and Walton were building stores in cities with populations of 50,000 or more, assuming that smaller markets couldn't support the sales volumes necessary for discount retailing to work. But Sam had spent his entire life in small towns. He had delivered newspapers in Depression-era communities where every penny mattered, had operated successful stores in places like Newport and Bentonville that big retailers dismissed as too small to matter, and he knew with absolute certainty that working families in rural America wanted and deserved access to low prices just as much as suburban families did. The opportunity wasn't in competing with Kmart and Target for metropolitan customers. It was in serving the massive underserved market that every other discounter was ignoring. Throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s, Sam refined his vision for what would eventually become Walmart. He knew it would be a discount store focused on everyday low prices rather than promotional sales, that it would operate in small towns of 5,000 to 25,000 people that other discounters considered too small, that it would own or control its real estate to avoid the landlord problems that destroyed his Newport operation, and that it would build a distribution and logistics system that could supply stores efficiently across rural America where infrastructure was limited. He knew it would require capital that his variety stores couldn't generate alone, that it would demand operational systems far more sophisticated than anything variety stores needed, and that it would face skepticism from everyone in the retail industry who believed small-town discount retail was impossible. But Sam had been underestimated his entire life, dismissed as a poor farm kid delivering newspapers, written off as a naive veteran overpaying for a failing store, and counted out after losing his Newport operation to a landlord's betrayal. By 1962, after 12 years of operating variety stores and studying the discount retail revolution, Sam Walton was ready. He had proven his retail strategies worked, had built a small but successful chain of stores, had learned the hard lessons about ownership and control, and had identified a massive market opportunity that every other retailer was ignoring. He had saved capital, studied competitors, built supplier relationships, and recruited a team of managers who believed in his vision. Bentonville had given him the stable foundation, the learning laboratory, and the operational experience necessary to attempt something far more ambitious than a small-town variety store. The second chance that seemed like a retreat in 1950 had actually been preparation for a revolution that would begin in July of 1962. Walton's Five and Dime remained on the Bentonville Square, continuing to serve the local community and eventually becoming the Walmart Museum, a testament to where the empire truly began. But its real importance wasn't as a museum or historical curiosity. It was as the proving ground where Sam Walton transformed from a talented merchant into a retail revolutionary. The 12 years between leaving Newport in defeat and opening the first Walmart were the years when Sam learned to think bigger, move faster, protect smarter, and build systems that could scale from one store to thousands. Bentonville gave him the time, the space, and the ownership to become the merchant who would change retail forever. The newspaper boy had become a successful variety store operator, but he was about to become something far more significant: the architect of a discount retail revolution that would reshape American commerce and create the largest company in the world. July 2nd, 1962. Mark that date because it represents the moment when retail history split into two distinct eras, before Walmart and after Walmart. On that humid summer morning in Rogers, Arkansas, a small town of just over 5,000 people nestled in the Ozark Mountains, Sam Walton opened the doors to a 16,000-square-foot discount store at 719 West Walnut Street. The building was nothing special, the location was unremarkable, and the inventory was standard discount fare: household goods, clothing, automotive supplies, toys, hardware, sporting goods spread across 22 departments. But the strategy behind those walls, the philosophy driving every price tag, and the vision guiding every operational decision would eventually create the largest company in human history and fundamentally transform how billions of people access goods and services. The timing was almost poetic in its significance. 1962 wasn't just the year Sam Walton opened his discount store. It was the year the entire American retail landscape was being disrupted by discount retailing breaking into the mainstream. On the exact same day that Walmart opened in Rogers, Arkansas, Woolco launched its first stores as the discount division of the venerable Woolworth Company, backed by decades of retail experience and millions in capital. Just months earlier, on May 1st of that same year, Kmart had opened its first store in Garden City, Michigan, leveraging the resources and expertise of the Kresge Company, one of America's most successful variety store chains. And Target, the discount division of the prestigious Dayton Company, would launch its first store in Roseville, Minnesota, in October of that year, bringing upscale merchandising sensibility to discount retailing. These weren't small regional players. These were retail giants with massive capital, established supplier relationships, sophisticated management teams, and national ambitions entering the discount revolution with overwhelming advantages. So what chance did Sam Walton possibly have competing against these titans? He was a 44-year-old merchant operating a small chain of variety stores in rural Arkansas and Missouri, with limited capital, no sophisticated distribution infrastructure, no access to the cheapest suppliers, and no recognition beyond a few small Ozark Mountain communities. When he approached established retailers and potential investors about expanding into discount retailing, they dismissed him as a country bumpkin who didn't understand that discount stores required metropolitan markets with 50,000 or more people to generate sufficient sales volume. His own franchisors at Ben Franklin rejected his proposal to let him open discount stores under their banner, explaining that his ideas were too risky and his markets were too small. Even his own brother Bud Walton was skeptical, questioning whether discount retailing could succeed in the small town Sam insisted on targeting when every expert said it was impossible. But here's what all those experts, all those established retailers, all those sophisticated investors completely failed to understand. Sam Walton wasn't trying to compete with Kmart and Target for suburban customers. He was serving an entirely different market that every other discounter was ignoring. While Kmart focused on cities with populations of 50,000 to 100,000 and Target aimed at prosperous suburban communities surrounding major metropolitan areas, Walmart targeted towns of 5,000 to 25,000 people, rural communities that big retailers dismissed as too small, too poor, and too scattered to justify investment. These were towns where Sam had grown up, communities he understood viscerally because he had delivered newspapers there during the Depression, places where working families counted every penny and drove significant distances for better prices because saving money wasn't optional but essential for survival. The first Walmart embodied Sam's revolutionary philosophy in every detail. The massive sign outside proclaimed two promises that would define the company for decades: "We sell for less," and "Satisfaction guaranteed." These weren't marketing slogans. They were contractual commitments that Sam took with absolute seriousness, obsessively comparing his prices against every competitor and demanding that his team find ways to go even lower. Inside the store, the layout was pure efficiency. Wide aisles allowing easy browsing, self-service displays encouraging impulse purchases, centrally located checkout counters minimizing employee walking distance, and utilitarian fixtures keeping overhead costs minimal so savings could be passed to customers. There was no fancy decor, no expensive architectural details, no attempt to create an upscale shopping environment, because every dollar spent on aesthetics was a dollar that couldn't be used to lower prices or expand operations. The pricing strategy was almost suicidally aggressive by conventional retail standards. Sam operated on profit margins that established retailers considered impossible, sometimes marking up products by just 15 to 20% above wholesale cost, when traditional retailers marked up 30 to 50% or more. He compensated for those razor-thin margins through volume, betting everything on the theory that lower prices would generate dramatically higher sales, that customers would drive farther and buy more if they could trust they were getting genuine value. It was the same lesson he had learned in Newport, where aggressive pricing and high volume had transformed a failing store into a spectacular success, but now he was applying it with even more intensity, pushing margins lower than anyone thought sustainable and betting that efficiency and scale would eventually make the model not just viable but dominant. But Sam had another crucial advantage that his better capitalized competitors lacked. He understood small-town retail dynamics in ways that big city executives never could. He knew that in communities of 5,000 to 10,000 people, One well-run discount store could capture virtually the entire market because customers had limited alternatives and would embrace a retailer who genuinely served their needs. He knew that word of mouth in small towns was incredibly powerful, that satisfied customers would tell their neighbors, and that reputation mattered more than advertising in communities where everyone knew everyone. He knew that small-town customers valued personal connection and would reward retailers who treated them with respect rather than condescension, who understood their struggles rather than judging their limited budgets. These insights, gained from a lifetime in small-town America, gave Sam a competitive advantage that no MBA program could teach and no amount of capital could buy. The opening day was hardly a glamorous affair. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony with local dignitaries, no grand celebration, no media coverage beyond perhaps a small notice in the local newspaper. Sam and his small team simply opened the doors and went to work, serving customers, restocking shelves, learning what worked and what didn't, beginning the iterative process of continuous improvement that would define Walmart's culture for decades. Some accounts suggest the store was so Spartan and humble that shoppers initially questioned whether it was actually open for business, whether this bare-bones operation could really deliver on its promises of the lowest prices and satisfaction guaranteed. But the prices spoke for themselves. When customers compared what Walmart charged against what they had been paying at traditional retailers, the savings were undeniable, dramatic, and immediately compelling. Within months, the Rogers store validated Sam's entire thesis. Customers drove from surrounding towns, sometimes traveling 30 to 50 miles to shop at Walmart because the savings justified the drive. Sales volume exceeded expectations, proving that small-town America had massive pent-up demand for discount retailing that no one else was serving. The profit margins were thin as promised, but the volume more than compensated, generating substantial profits that could be reinvested into expansion. By the end of 1962, Sam was already planning additional stores, studying nearby communities, refining his site selection criteria, and building the operational systems necessary to scale from one store to dozens. The newspaper boy from the Depression had just planted the seed for what would become the largest retail empire in human history. Compare that opening to Walmart's competitors launching in 1962. Kmart opened with massive fanfare, leveraging decades of Kresge Company experience and targeting populous markets with sophisticated merchandising. Woolco launched with the backing of Woolworth, one of the most recognized retail brands in America. Target brought the prestige and capital of the Dayton Company to upscale suburban discount retailing. All three had advantages Sam could only dream about: more capital, better locations, stronger supplier relationships, established brand recognition, and access to the largest, most prosperous markets. Yet within 3 decades, Walmart would surpass all of them combined, ultimately driving Woolco completely out of business and relegating Kmart to irrelevance, while Target survived by finding its own distinct niche serving different customers than Walmart targeted. Why did Walmart win when competitors with superior resources were competing in the exact same industry during the exact same era? Because Sam Walton understood something fundamental that his competitors missed. There wasn't one American retail market but many different markets, and the massive underserved small-town market offered the greatest opportunity precisely because everyone else was ignoring it. While Kmart and Target fought brutal battles for metropolitan and suburban customers, Walmart built an empire in rural America with virtually no competition, establishing dominant positions in thousands of small towns before big retailers even realized what was happening. By the time competitors recognized the opportunity in small-town America, Walmart had already secured the best locations, built the distribution infrastructure, and established the customer loyalty that made dislodging them nearly impossible. That opening day in Rogers, Arkansas, seemed insignificant at the time. Just another discount store opening in a forgotten town, operated by a middle-aged merchant with big dreams and limited resources. The retail press didn't cover it, Wall Street didn't notice it, and competitors didn't consider it a threat. But July 2nd, 1962, was actually the day that retail's future began. The moment when a newspaper boy's understanding of value and working-class struggle became the foundation for revolutionary change. The discount store at 719 West Walnut Street wasn't just Sam Walton's new business. It was the prototype for a retail model that would eventually reshape global commerce, demonstrating that serving the overlooked and underserved could be more profitable than fighting for the most obvious markets. The revolution had begun, and nobody except Sam Walton even realized it. Here's what separated Sam Walton from every other retailer in America. He genuinely believed that his job wasn't to maximize profit on each transaction, but to save customers money on every single purchase, every single day, without exception. This wasn't marketing rhetoric or clever positioning. This was religious conviction born from watching his mother stretch Depression-era dollars and delivering newspapers to families who counted pennies because pennies determined whether they ate. While competitors like Kmart and Sears focused on maximizing profit margins, running promotional sales that created artificial urgency, and training customers to wait for discounts before buying, Sam built Walmart on a radically different foundation. Everyday low prices, a strategy so counterintuitive that retail experts dismissed it as commercial suicide. The concept was brutally simple yet revolutionary in execution. Offer the lowest possible prices every single day, eliminate the need for sales and promotions, and generate massive volume that would compensate for the razor-thin profit margins that made traditional retailers think Sam was insane. The numbers tell the story of just how aggressive Sam's pricing strategy actually was. Traditional retailers in the 1960s operated on gross profit margins of 35 to 50%, marking up products substantially to cover overhead costs, advertising expenses, and generate comfortable profits. Department stores like Sears might buy a product for $10 and sell it for $15 to $18, capturing 50 to 80% margins that seemed perfectly reasonable by industry standards. Even the early discount pioneers like Kmart typically operated on margins of 25 to 35%, undercutting department stores but still maintaining what Wall Street considered healthy profitability. Sam Walton looked at those numbers and decided they were obscene, that every percentage point of margin above the absolute minimum necessary for survival was money stolen from working families who desperately needed lower prices. Walmart operated on gross margins of 15 to 22%, sometimes even lower on high-volume items, pricing products so aggressively that competitors literally couldn't understand how Walmart stayed in business. But here's the genius that experts missed when they dismissed Sam's strategy as unsustainable. Volume changes everything. When you sell twice as many units at half the profit margin, you generate the same total profit while serving twice as many customers and building exponentially greater loyalty. Sam understood that working families would drive 30, 40, even 60 miles to shop at Walmart if they knew with absolute certainty that they were getting the lowest prices, not just on sale items or loss leaders but on everything in the store. That certainty eliminated the need for customers to comparison shop, to wait for promotions, to question whether they were getting a good deal, creating a trust relationship that generated repeat visits and word-of-mouth advertising that no marketing budget could buy. While Kmart spent millions on advertising and promotions, Walmart's advertising budget was almost non-existent because satisfied customers became unpaid sales representatives, telling their friends and neighbors about the money they saved, creating organic growth that competitors couldn't match regardless of their advertising spending. Sam's personal frugality became legendary and served as the visible embodiment of Walmart's cost-obsessed culture. Even as he became one of the richest men in America, worth billions of dollars on paper, Sam drove a 1979 Ford pickup truck with no air conditioning, flew coach on commercial airlines when he had to fly at all, stayed at budget motels during store visits, and lived in the same modest house in Bentonville that he had occupied for decades. This wasn't an act or publicity stunt. Sam genuinely believed that every dollar spent on executive perks was a dollar that couldn't be used to lower prices for customers, and he led by example in ways that shamed other executives into similar frugality. When Walmart managers proposed spending money on fancy offices, expensive furniture, or corporate luxuries, Sam would ask a simple question that became company legend. How does this help us lower prices for customers? If the answer wasn't convincing, the expenditure was denied, creating a culture where waste was considered almost immoral and efficiency was celebrated as the highest virtue. This obsession with cost control extended to every aspect of Walmart's operations in ways that seem almost comical in retrospect but generated enormous competitive advantages. Sam negotiated directly with suppliers, bypassing wholesalers and middlemen whenever possible, demanding the absolute lowest prices and threatening to find alternative suppliers if vendors didn't cooperate. He implemented systems to track inventory with unprecedented precision, minimizing the capital tied up in unsold goods and reducing losses from theft, damage, or obsolescence that plagued competitors. He kept store designs utilitarian and simple, refusing to spend money on architectural flourishes or fancy fixtures that customers didn't care about and wouldn't pay for. He located stores in cheaper real estate, often outside town centers where land costs were lower, betting that customers would drive the extra mile if prices justified it. Every decision, every policy, every operational procedure was evaluated through a single lens. Does this reduce costs so we can lower prices? Wall Street hated Walmart's strategy, at least initially. Financial analysts looked at the company's thin profit margins and declared the business model unsustainable, predicting that Walmart would eventually be forced to raise prices or face bankruptcy when the inevitable economic downturn arrived. Investors questioned why Sam refused to maximize short-term profits, arguing that he was leaving money on the table and failing his fiduciary duty to shareholders by operating on margins that seemed unnecessarily low. Credit rating agencies worried about Walmart's aggressive expansion strategy, questioning whether the company was overextending itself by opening stores faster than it could properly manage them. But Sam ignored the skeptics because he understood something fundamental that Wall Street analysts sitting in New York City offices could never grasp. He wasn't building a company for quarterly earnings reports, but creating an empire that would dominate retail for generations by earning customer loyalty that no competitor could break regardless of their pricing tactics. The results spoke louder than any Wall Street analysis. By 1967, just 5 years after opening the first Walmart, the Walton family owned 24 stores generating $12.7 million in annual sales, proof that the low-price strategy wasn't just surviving but thriving. By 1969, when the company officially incorporated as Walmart Stores Incorporated, annual revenues had grown dramatically, and expansion was accelerating as Sam refined the operational systems necessary to scale from dozens of stores to hundreds. By 1970, when Walmart went public to raise capital for even more aggressive expansion, the company operated 38 stores generating over $30 million in sales, validating Sam's thesis that small-town discount retailing could generate spectacular growth if executed with discipline and focus. The stock market debut wasn't just a fundraising exercise. It was vindication of a strategy that experts had dismissed as impossible. Customer loyalty became Walmart's secret weapon, an asset that didn't appear on balance sheets but generated value that competitors couldn't replicate no matter how much money they spent. Working families who discovered Walmart became evangelical advocates, bringing friends and relatives to the store, planning shopping trips around Walmart's locations, adjusting their routines to incorporate regular visits because the savings were simply too significant to ignore. In small towns where Walmart opened stores, competing retailers watched their customer bases evaporate almost overnight as shoppers realized they had been overpaying for years and Walmart offered a better alternative. That loyalty wasn't purchased through advertising or promotions. It was earned through consistent delivery on the promise of everyday low prices, through treating customers with respect rather than condescension, through making working families feel that finally someone in retail actually understood and valued their business. Sam had learned on those Depression-era newspaper routes that customer loyalty comes from genuine service and value, not clever marketing, and that lesson became the foundation for building the most successful retail operation in history. The operational innovations that made Walmart's low-price strategy sustainable were years ahead of the competition. In 1969, Walmart partnered with IBM to develop computerized systems that provided daily sales reports from each store, giving Sam and his management team unprecedented visibility into what was selling, what wasn't, and how to optimize inventory and pricing decisions. In 1970, Walmart opened its first distribution center in Bentonville, creating a hub-and-spoke logistics system that reduced transportation costs and ensured stores could be restocked efficiently without maintaining excessive inventory. In 1977, Walmart implemented computerized ordering systems that communicated directly with suppliers, reducing paperwork, minimizing errors, and accelerating the replenishment cycle. By 1983, Walmart had installed a private satellite network connecting all stores, distribution centers, and headquarters in real-time communication that gave the company's supply chain advantages that competitors wouldn't match for another decade. These weren't technology investments for their own sake. They were strategic tools that directly supported the mission of lowering costs and prices. Compare Walmart's approach to how competitors operated and you'll understand why Sam's strategy was so disruptive. Kmart focused on urban and suburban markets, accepting higher real estate costs, spending heavily on advertising, operating on comfortable margins, and competing primarily on convenience rather than having the absolute lowest prices. Sears relied on its brand reputation, offered higher quality merchandise at premium prices, and assumed customer loyalty was secure because they had been the dominant retailer for generations. Independent retailers in small towns operated on high margins because they faced little competition, assuming their local monopolies were permanent and that customers had no alternatives. Walmart destroyed all these assumptions by proving that customers would abandon established retailers, drive significant distances, and completely change their shopping habits if offered genuinely lower prices backed by reliable selection and service. The low-price revolution wasn't just a pricing strategy. It was a complete reimagining of the relationship between retailers and customers, where customers held power and retailers served them rather than the reverse. By the end of the 1970s, Walmart operated 276 stores generating $1.24 billion in annual sales, growth that validated every element of Sam's revolutionary strategy. The newspaper boy from the Depression had proven that understanding value from the customer's perspective, operating with obsessive cost discipline, and prioritizing long-term customer loyalty over short-term profit maximization could build something far more valuable than conventional retail wisdom ever imagined. Wall Street was no longer skeptical. They were converts, bidding up Walmart stock and recognizing that Sam Walton hadn't just built a successful regional chain, but had pioneered a business model that would eventually dominate global retail. The low-price revolution had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, and it was just getting started. October 1st, 1970. That's the day Sam Walton made a decision that would transform Walmart from a regional success story into an unstoppable juggernaut with the capital to conquer American retail. Walmart went public, offering stock to investors through the over-the-counter market at a price that valued the company at approximately $176 million. An impressive figure for a company that had opened its first store just 8 years earlier. Sam had resisted going public for years, preferring to maintain family control and avoid the quarterly earnings pressure that drove other retailers to make short-term decisions that sacrificed long-term value. But the mathematics of expansion were undeniable. Opening new stores required massive capital for real estate, inventory, and infrastructure, and the Walton family's resources, while substantial, couldn't fund the kind of aggressive expansion necessary to dominate the small-town market before competitors realized the opportunity and moved in. Going public wasn't surrender. It was strategic acceleration, raising hundreds of millions of dollars that would fuel a growth trajectory that would shock the retail world. The timing was perfect because Walmart had proven its model worked at scale. By 1970, the company operated 38 stores generating $31 million in annual revenue with consistent profitability that demonstrated the low-price, high-volume strategy wasn't just sustainable but spectacularly successful. Investors who bought Walmart stock in 1970 didn't realize they were purchasing the best-performing investment opportunity of the next several decades. A single share purchased at that initial offering would eventually split multiple times and generate returns that made early Walmart investors millionaires. But Wall Street analysts initially remained skeptical, questioning whether a rural discount chain could compete against established giants like Kmart and Sears, whether the small-town strategy would exhaust available markets, and whether Sam Walton's obsessive focus on low prices would eventually destroy profitability. Those skeptics would spend the next 2 decades being proven catastrophically wrong as Walmart's growth accelerated beyond anyone's wildest projections. The 1970s became Walmart's decade of explosive expansion, a period when the company opened stores at a pace that seemed almost reckless but was actually carefully calculated to secure the best locations before competitors could respond. By 1976, Walmart operated 153 stores generating $340 million in annual sales, a tenfold increase in just 6 years that validated every element of Sam's strategy and proved that small-town discount retailing could scale dramatically. By 1979, the company had grown to 276 stores generating $1.24 billion in sales, becoming a genuine retail powerhouse that could no longer be dismissed as a regional curiosity. The expansion wasn't random. Sam and his team identified small towns across Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, and eventually spreading across the South and Midwest, systematically opening stores in communities that big retailers ignored, building dominant market positions before anyone else recognized the opportunity. Each new store followed the proven formula: everyday low prices, exceptional customer service, efficient operations, and relentless cost control that allowed Walmart to undercut local competitors while generating the profits necessary to fund even more expansion. But Sam wasn't content with just replicating the basic Walmart discount store format. In 1983, he launched Sam's Club, a revolutionary warehouse club concept that would become another pillar of the company's empire and open entirely new market segments. The first Sam's Club opened in Midwest City, Oklahoma, offering businesses and individual members the opportunity to buy products in bulk at even lower prices than Walmart's already aggressive pricing, paying an annual membership fee for the privilege. The concept wasn't entirely original. Sol Price had pioneered warehouse clubs with Price Club in California, proving that customers would pay membership fees and tolerate no-frills shopping environments in exchange for dramatically lower prices on bulk purchases. But Sam saw the opportunity to bring warehouse clubs to the underserved markets Walmart already dominated, leveraging existing supplier relationships, distribution infrastructure, and customer loyalty to build Sam's Club faster and more efficiently than any competitor could match. By the end of 1983, Sam's Club was already proving successful enough to justify rapid expansion, eventually growing to hundreds of locations serving millions of members and generating billions in annual revenue. The mid-1980s brought another transformative innovation: the Walmart Supercenter. In 1988, Walmart opened its first supercenter in Washington, Missouri, combining a traditional Walmart discount store with a full-scale grocery supermarket under one massive roof, spanning over 100,000 square feet. The concept was revolutionary because it created true one-stop shopping where customers could buy groceries, clothing, electronics, automotive supplies, pharmacy items, and everything else they needed in a single trip, maximizing convenience while maintaining Walmart's everyday low-price philosophy across every department. Traditional grocery chains had dominated food retail for decades, operating on comfortable margins and assuming their market positions were secure because discount retailers like Walmart didn't sell groceries. The Supercenter demolished that assumption, bringing Walmart's aggressive pricing and operational efficiency to the grocery business and fundamentally disrupting food retailing, just as discount stores had disrupted general merchandise years earlier. Grocery chains watched in horror as supercenters opened in their markets and immediately captured double-digit market share, undercutting their prices while offering far greater selection across non-food categories that traditional supermarkets couldn't match. The acquisition strategy accelerated Walmart's expansion into new geographic markets that would have taken years to penetrate through organic growth alone. Throughout the 1970s and early 80s, Walmart acquired smaller regional chains, buying their stores, their real estate, their customer relationships, and their market positions, then converting them to the Walmart format and implementing the operational systems that made the company so efficient. These acquisitions weren't about buying competitors to eliminate competition. They were about accelerating market entry, securing strategic locations, and rapidly building the store count necessary to justify investments in distribution centers and regional infrastructure. Each acquisition brought challenges as Walmart integrated different corporate cultures, updated outdated systems, and retrained employees in the Walmart way of operating. But the company had developed expertise in acquisitions that allowed them to execute these transitions far more smoothly than competitors who attempted similar strategies. By the mid-1980s, Walmart had become expert at identifying acquisition targets, negotiating favorable terms, and rapidly converting acquired stores into profitable Walmart operations that generated immediate returns. By 1987, just 25 years after opening that first store in Rogers, Arkansas, Walmart operated 1,198 stores with over 200,000 associates generating almost $16 billion in annual sales. Think about that growth trajectory for a moment. From one store to nearly 1,200 stores in a single generation, from 0 employees to 200,000 associates, from uncertain startup to $16 billion revenue powerhouse. The compound annual growth rate was staggering, far exceeding what traditional retailers considered possible, proving that Sam's strategies weren't just marginally better than competitors, but represented a fundamental reimagining of how retail could operate. Wall Street analysts who had dismissed Walmart as a rural curiosity were now calling it the future of retail. Institutional investors were loading up on the stock, and business schools were writing case studies analyzing how Sam Walton had built something that defied conventional wisdom and established entirely new standards for retail excellence. The most satisfying moment came in 1990 when Walmart surpassed Sears, Roebuck and Company to become America's largest retailer, dethroning a company that had dominated American retail for nearly a century and seemed utterly invincible just a generation earlier. Sears had built its empire on catalog sales, department stores in major cities, and a brand reputation that made it America's most trusted retailer for generations of families. But Sears had become complacent, operating on comfortable margins, focusing on traditional strategies, and dismissing discount retailing as a fad that would never threaten their dominance. Walmart proved that no retail empire was permanent, that serving customers better by offering lower prices and greater convenience would always defeat brand reputation and historical market position, and that a company started by a newspaper boy from Depression-era Oklahoma could outcompete and eventually dominate retail giants with a century of experience and billions in resources. The victory wasn't just about sales numbers. It was validation of everything Sam had believed since delivering newspapers in the Great Depression. Proof that understanding value from the customer's perspective mattered more than anything else in retail. By 1991, Walmart operated 1,728 stores and 228 Sam's Clubs, generating almost $33 billion in annual revenue while employing 371,000 associates. The expansion showed no signs of slowing. Every year brought hundreds of new stores, billions in additional revenue, and ever-increasing dominance across more geographic markets and retail categories. Sam was now 73 years old, still driving his beat-up pickup truck, still visiting stores to talk with associates and customers, still obsessing over every cost and every price, still living the frugal lifestyle that had defined his entire journey from poverty to becoming the richest man in America. The empire he had built wasn't just successful by traditional measures. It had become a force that was reshaping American retail, transforming how communities access goods, revolutionizing supply chain management and logistics, and proving that a business built on genuine service to working families could become the most powerful commercial enterprise in history. Going public and going national had worked beyond anyone's imagination, and the revolution was far from finished. 1991. That's the year retail history reached its climax, the moment when David finally defeated Goliath, when the newspaper boy from Depression-era Oklahoma officially surpassed the most iconic retailer in American history to claim the throne as the nation's largest retailer. Walmart's annual revenues exceeded $32 billion, eclipsing Sears, Roebuck and Company's sales for the first time in a power shift that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. Sears had dominated American retail for over a century, survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless economic cycles, built a brand so trusted that generations of American families had furnished their homes, clothed their children, and equipped their lives almost exclusively through Sears catalogs and department stores. Yet here was Walmart, a company that didn't even exist 30 years earlier, started by a former variety store operator in rural Arkansas with limited capital and unlimited audacity, claiming the crown that Sears assumed would be theirs forever. The victory wasn't just about sales numbers. It was vindication of everything Sam Walton had believed since walking those newspaper routes, proof that serving working families with genuine value mattered more than brand heritage, fancy stores, or a century of market dominance. The numbers tell a story of complete transformation in American retail. Walmart operated 1,728 stores and 228 Sam's Clubs across the United States, employing 371,000 associates who served millions of customers every single week. Over 140 million Americans walked through Walmart stores weekly, making it not just a retailer but an essential infrastructure of American life. as fundamental to daily existence as roads, schools, or hospitals. Studies estimated that average American families saved approximately $2,500 annually by shopping at Walmart compared to traditional retailers. Savings that weren't trivial luxuries but genuine improvements in quality of life for working families living paycheck to paycheck. For a family earning $30,000 annually, $2,500 in savings represented over 8% of their income, the difference between struggling and surviving, between going without and having enough. Sam Walton had built something far more significant than a profitable business. He had created a mechanism that genuinely improved millions of lives by making goods accessible at prices working families could actually afford. Sears never saw it coming, and that blindness was its fatal mistake. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, as Walmart systematically conquered small-town America, Sears executives dismissed the threat, convinced that a rural discount chain could never compete against their sophisticated department stores, trusted brand, and loyal customer base built over generations. Sears focused on maintaining profit margins, operating beautiful stores in prime locations, offering higher quality merchandise at premium prices, and assuming customer loyalty was permanent because they had always been America's retailer. But customer loyalty isn't inherited. It's earned daily through value, service, and genuine respect for customers' needs and budgets. Lessons Sam had learned delivering newspapers while Sears executives studied in business schools that taught theories disconnected from working-class reality. When Sears finally recognized Walmart as a genuine threat in the late 1980s, it was already too late. Walmart had secured dominant positions in thousands of communities, built distribution infrastructure that couldn't be replicated quickly, and earned customer loyalty so strong that Sears couldn't break it regardless of how much they spent on advertising or promotions. The contrast between the two companies' philosophies couldn't have been starker. Sears believed retail was about selling quality merchandise at fair prices while generating comfortable profit margins that rewarded shareholders and supported expensive infrastructure like the iconic Sears Tower in Chicago, a monument to corporate success that cost a fortune to maintain and impressed executives more than customers. Walmart believed retail was about fanatical cost control, passing every possible penny of savings to customers, operating from modest headquarters in Bentonville that would embarrass most regional retailers, let alone the world's largest company, and measuring success not by profit margins but by how much money customers saved. Sears executives flew first class, stayed in luxury hotels, drove company cars, and enjoyed executive perks that seemed normal and deserved for leaders of America's retail giant. Sam Walton drove a beat-up pickup truck, flew coach, stayed in budget motels, and questioned every expenditure that didn't directly benefit customers, leading by example in ways that made Walmart's culture fundamentally different from traditional retailers who had lost touch with the customers they claimed to serve. But 1991 wasn't just about surpassing Sears domestically. It was also the year Walmart began its transformation into a global powerhouse. In November of 1991, Walmart opened its first international store, a Sam's Club in Mexico City, through a joint venture with Cifra, a Mexican retail company that would eventually become Walmart de Mexico, or Walmex. The decision to go international was carefully calculated. Sam knew that domestic growth would eventually slow as Walmart saturated available markets, and that the lessons learned in American small towns could potentially transform retail in developing nations where working families desperately needed access to affordable goods. Mexico was the perfect first step. Geographically close, culturally connected through shared borders, economically developing with rising middle class hungry for value, and underserved by modern retail infrastructure that could deliver goods efficiently at low prices. The Mexico City Sam's Club validated the thesis immediately, demonstrating that Walmart's everyday low-price philosophy resonated powerfully with customers who had been overcharged by traditional retailers for generations. The international expansion strategy revealed Sam's vision extending far beyond American borders. Throughout the 1990s, Walmart would enter Canada, acquire stores in Britain, establish operations in Brazil and Argentina, and eventually plant flags across Asia, including China, the world's largest consumer market. Each international entry brought unique challenges. Different regulations, unfamiliar consumer preferences, established local competitors, cultural barriers, and logistics nightmares that made American operations look simple by comparison. But Walmart had advantages that transcended geography. Unmatched supply chain expertise, technology infrastructure years ahead of local competitors, capital to invest in long-term market development, and most importantly, a business philosophy that resonated universally because working families everywhere, regardless of country or culture, appreciated lower prices and greater value. By the 2000s, Walmart International would operate thousands of stores generating over $100 billion in annual revenue, proving that the newspaper boy's understanding of value could change retail not just in America but globally. What made Walmart's victory over Sears so profound was how it democratized access to goods in ways that transformed American life. Before Walmart, rural and small-town Americans paid significantly higher prices than urban and suburban residents because local retailers operated as semi-monopolies, marking up products substantially knowing customers had no alternatives within reasonable driving distance. Walmart destroyed that geographic price discrimination, bringing everyday low prices to communities that had been economically exploited for generations, creating genuine economic justice through market competition rather than government regulation. A family in rural Arkansas could now pay the same prices as families in Chicago or Los Angeles, accessing the same products, the same selection, the same value that had previously been reserved for metropolitan residents. This wasn't just retail innovation. It was economic revolution that redistributed wealth by forcing all retailers to compete on price and value rather than location-based monopoly power. The impact on American families was transformative and measurable. Studies showed that Walmart's aggressive pricing forced competitors to lower their prices to remain competitive, creating a deflationary effect that benefited even people who never shopped at Walmart. The Consumer Price Index for general merchandise grew more slowly in markets where Walmart operated compared to markets without Walmart presence, demonstrating that Sam's low-price philosophy didn't just benefit Walmart customers but created economic benefits that rippled through entire communities. Economists estimated that Walmart saved American consumers collectively over $100 billion annually through direct low prices and competitive pressure on other retailers, wealth that stayed in workers' pockets rather than flowing to retail shareholders, genuine economic populism that improved living standards for working and middle-class families more effectively than most government programs. Sam Walton had accomplished something remarkable, building enormous personal wealth while simultaneously making millions of other families wealthier through savings that accumulated year after year. By the end of 1991, Walmart's position as America's largest retailer was unassailable. The company was growing faster than ever, opening hundreds of new stores annually, expanding internationally, innovating with supercenters that disrupted grocery retail, and building technological and logistical advantages that competitors couldn't match regardless of their resources. Sam Walton was 73 years old, battling bone cancer that would ultimately take his life the following year, but still visiting stores, still obsessing over prices, still embodying the values that had built the empire. The crown had changed hands from Sears to Walmart, from the old retail aristocracy to the new retail democracy, from a company that served itself to a company that served customers. The newspaper boy who counted pennies during the Depression had proven that understanding value from the customer's perspective, operating with absolute discipline and efficiency, and maintaining genuine humility, regardless of wealth, could build something more powerful than any traditional retail giant. 1991 wasn't just the year Walmart became America's largest retailer. It was the year Sam Walton's vision of retail excellence became the standard against which every other retailer would be measured for generations to come. 1992. Sam Walton stood in the White House receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor, from President George Bush, recognition that his contributions to American life transcended mere business success and represented genuine service to the nation. At 74 years old, ravaged by bone cancer that was destroying his body, but not his spirit, Sam used that moment to articulate the philosophy that had guided his entire journey from newspaper boy to the richest man in America. He spoke about Walmart's mission with the clarity and conviction that had defined his entire life. Saving people money so they can live better, 8 simple words that captured everything he believed about retail, about capitalism, about service, and about what business should accomplish in a just society. This wasn't corporate rhetoric crafted by marketing departments. This was the distilled wisdom of a man who had delivered newspapers in the Depression and never forgotten what it meant to count pennies, who had built the largest retail empire in history by obsessively focusing on value for working families who needed every dollar to stretch as far as possible. The cancer was merciless, but Sam remained Sam until the very end. Even as the disease consumed him, even as his body failed and the pain became unbearable, he continued visiting Walmart stores, talking with associates, questioning managers about sales figures, obsessing over whether prices were as low as they could possibly be. He reviewed financial reports from his hospital bed, analyzing performance metrics, studying competitor pricing, planning future expansion even when he knew he wouldn't live to see those plans executed. His doctors begged him to rest, to accept that he had built something extraordinary and could let others manage it, but Sam couldn't stop being who he had always been. A merchant who believed that every day you weren't serving customers better was a day wasted, that retirement was surrender, and that the mission of helping working families save money didn't end just because you were dying. This relentless dedication wasn't obsession or workaholism in the negative sense. It was genuine love for the work, for the customers, for the mission that had defined his entire adult life and given meaning to every sacrifice he had made along the way. April 5th, 1992. That's when Samuel Moore Walton died at his home in Bentonville, Arkansas, surrounded by family, having fought bone cancer with the same determination he had brought to building Walmart, but finally succumbing to a disease that even his legendary willpower couldn't defeat. He died as the richest man in America, with a personal fortune estimated at over $25 billion. Wealth so vast it seemed almost incomprehensible for someone who had started with nothing, who had delivered newspapers for pennies, who had borrowed $20,000 from his father-in-law to buy his first store. But here's what made Sam Walton different from every other billionaire in America. The wealth was almost incidental, a side effect of building something that genuinely served people rather than the goal itself. He died driving the same beat-up pickup truck, living in the same modest house, wearing the same simple clothes, maintaining the frugality that had defined his character since childhood, proving that acquiring wealth hadn't changed who he was or what he valued most. Service, efficiency, and helping working families afford the goods they needed. The outpouring of grief was extraordinary and revealed just how deeply Sam had touched American life. Thousands of Walmart associates mourned not just as employees losing a boss, but as people who had lost someone who genuinely cared about them, who had implemented profit-sharing and stock ownership programs that made many hourly workers wealthy, who had treated retail clerks with more respect than most CEOs showed their executives. Customers across small-town America felt genuine loss, recognizing that Sam Walton had fundamentally improved their lives by bringing affordable goods to communities that had been economically exploited for generations by retailers who charged whatever they wanted because customers had no alternatives. Business leaders recognized that a giant had fallen, someone who had revolutionized retail not through financial engineering or marketing gimmicks, but through relentless focus on operational excellence and genuine customer service. The newspaper boy from the Depression had become an American icon, proof that you could rise from poverty to extraordinary wealth while maintaining your values, serving others, and genuinely improving the world. But Sam's death wasn't the end of Walmart's story. It was the beginning of its transformation into a truly global empire that would eventually operate in over 20 countries and serve hundreds of millions of customers worldwide. His son Rob Walton became chairman of the board, continuing the family's leadership while professional managers executed the expansion strategies Sam had envisioned before his death. The Mexico operations that Sam had personally launched just months before dying would grow into Walmart's largest and most successful international market, eventually operating thousands of stores serving millions of Mexican families with the same everyday low-price philosophy that had conquered American small towns. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Walmart expanded into Canada, China, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Argentina, and eventually over 20 countries across every inhabited continent, proving that Sam's understanding of value transcended cultural and geographic boundaries because working families everywhere appreciated lower prices and better access to goods regardless of language, culture, or economic system. Today, Walmart operates over 11,000 stores in 24 countries, employs over 2.3 million associates, making it one of the largest private employers on earth, and generates over $650 billion in annual revenue, more than the gross domestic product of most nations. The Walton family has accumulated wealth exceeding $200 billion, making them one of the wealthiest families in human history, Yet they continue funding charitable causes and maintaining the company culture that Sam established decades earlier. Over 260 million customers visit Walmart stores globally every week, and studies consistently show that Walmart's aggressive pricing saves American consumers alone over $100 billion annually through direct savings and competitive pressure, forcing other retailers to lower their prices. These aren't just impressive statistics. They represent millions of families who can afford goods they couldn't otherwise buy, children who have toys and clothes because Walmart made them affordable, households that can allocate savings to education or healthcare because they spend less on basic necessities. Sam Walton's legacy isn't measured in billions of dollars or thousands of stores, but in the genuine improvement to quality of life for hundreds of millions of working families worldwide. The retail revolution Sam pioneered transformed how the entire industry operates in ways that extend far beyond Walmart itself. His innovations in supply chain management, distribution logistics, inventory control, and technology integration became industry standards that every major retailer had to adopt to remain competitive. His insistence on everyday low pricing rather than promotional sales changed consumer expectations and forced competitors to abandon high-low pricing strategies that had dominated retail for generations. His focus on operational efficiency and cost control made waste unacceptable and forced retailers to constantly improve productivity or face extinction. His belief that retail's purpose was serving customers rather than maximizing profit margins shifted the entire industry's philosophy, at least among retailers who survived Walmart's disruption. The newspaper boy's lessons about value learned during the Depression became the foundation for modern retail practice, proving that childhood poverty and struggle can create wisdom that elite education and privileged backgrounds never could. Yet Sam Walton's story raises profound questions about capitalism, inequality, and what success should mean in a just society. He created enormous wealth for his family while simultaneously helping millions of working families afford better lives through lower prices. A combination of outcomes that seems almost contradictory but was entirely consistent with his philosophy. He built the world's largest company while maintaining genuine humility and frugality that put most middle-class Americans to shame, proving that wealth doesn't require conspicuous consumption or aristocratic pretension. He disrupted and destroyed thousands of small independent retailers while arguing he was serving customers better than those independents ever had, raising complex questions about whether efficiency and low prices justify the social costs of market consolidation. These contradictions and complexities make Sam's legacy fascinating rather than simple, worthy of study rather than blind celebration, demonstrating that even the most successful business leaders create mixed outcomes that defy easy moral judgment. What's undeniable is that the newspaper boy from Depression-era Oklahoma changed retail forever and proved that understanding value from the customer's perspective matters more than almost anything else in business. Sam Walton showed that you don't need elite education, family wealth, or social connections to build something extraordinary. You need genuine understanding of customer needs, relentless focus on execution, willingness to challenge conventional wisdom, and discipline to maintain your values regardless of wealth or success. He proved that childhood poverty can be an advantage rather than a handicap if you learn the right lessons, that struggle builds character that privilege can never create, and that the best business strategies often come from genuine empathy with customer struggles rather than abstract theory developed in business schools. From delivering newspapers for pennies to building a $600 billion empire, from counting every penny during the Depression to saving working families trillions of dollars over decades, from losing everything to a landlord's betrayal to creating the most successful retail operation in human history, Sam Walton's journey represents the American dream not as myth but as lived reality. So what do you think about Sam Walton's legacy? Did his obsession with low prices genuinely improve millions of lives? Or did it come at costs that outweigh the benefits? Could someone build another Walmart today? Or was Sam's success dependent on circumstances that no longer exist? What lessons from the newspaper boy's journey apply to your own life and ambitions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore more stories of how ordinary people built extraordinary things against impossible odds. The revolution Sam Walton started continues today every time someone walks into a Walmart and saves money they desperately need for something else. Proof that one person's vision and determination can genuinely change the world.